From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is the original podcast about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network, and you can find all of our previous episodes at yourunpodcast.com, as well as all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and he might or might not be responsible for me having a Fat Guy Goes Nutsoid poster on my wall currently. His name is Sean, and Sean, how are you doing today?
We got to see, you got to put up on the socials this poster.
I just like that, I have it directly next to this very lesser known movie, this little indie film that like no one's seen. And then there's this mega blockbuster called Fat Guy Goes Nutsoid that surely is going to launch a franchise that has like 13 movies. They look really look really great next to each other.
They probably look like they should be next to each other in like a museum.
Oh, clear. Well, one of them. The other one's, whoever heard of this John Carpenter guy?
Sounds like a loser.
Yeah, total bum. Sean, how you doing? What have you been up to this week?
Oh boy. What haven't I been up to? Watched a lot of really great movies. Would you like to hear about them?
I want to hear all about them.
All right. Well, I started off with this movie. I was kind of surfing around on the free movies that were available through Plex. And one that really caught my fancy was a movie called Rooftops. Did I just say Rooftops? I meant to say Rooftops. Let me pitch this to you, okay? Take the director of West Side Story, not the new thing, but the original, like 60s West Side Story. He also directed a little movie called The Andromeda Strain. And
it's the snapping one, right?
Yeah, jets.
Yeah,
if you're a jet all the way. It has the guy who played Doug Masters from Iron Eagle. It's got Tisha Campbell, Luis Guzman, Alan Payne. This movie's called Street Tops. No, this movie is called Rooftops.
Street Tops.
It should be called Street Tops. Basically,
Street Top sounds like a porn movie.
Well, these street kids who live on New York City rooftops, they do shitty capoeira before capoeira was capoeira, like before we knew what capoeira was, and they didn't know what it was either. And they do it to make money. Like they call it battling, and they'll do these dance fight moves, but if you touch the other person, you're out. You have to knock him off this platform.
Luis Guzman does this?
No, he's just an abusive stepfather.
Wow.
He was probably 22.
Yeah, but he looked like an abusive stepfather at 22.
He looked like an abusive stepfather when his stepfather was probably abusing him.
Probably.
And
anyway, we're going to get attacked by Luis Guzman. He's going to shank us both. And
he's going to know. He's going to hear. His ears are going to be burning. Anyways.
Oh, Sid.
They're doing this battling. And there's this like side plot about capoeira. Like they actually see people doing capoeira, and the guy, Doug Masters, which I can't remember what his name is, he gets into it. Crack cocaine, that's part of it because it's the 80s. It's got, I don't know, the sound dubbing is distractingly horrible, and the soundtrack is pervasively upbeat for a movie about homeless kids. It's like really, they're just all about it. Top that off, that same night, I watched a movie called Midnight Ride, which is starring a favorite of mine, Michael Dudikoff, and Mark Hamill. It's a car chase movie where in one scene, Michael Dudikoff breaks his cast off of his leg with a rock on the side of the road. That's always a good sign. Mark Hamill plays,
as you do,
a murderous psychopath, and Michael Dudikoff is chasing him to try and get his wife back. And it's this back and forth cat and mouse car chase movie. It's interesting in a really shitty way, but the editing is trash tier and it's laughable. It's a riot. I truly enjoyed it. There's a scene Michael Dudikoff drives in this like Oldsmobile ragtop with a engine, like a blower, like a turbo or something.
Sure.
Taped to the hood of the car. It's a good movie. It's good. I'm telling you, watched tons of great stuff. I watched Showgirls, which, enough said. Haven't seen Showgirls in a hot minute. Have you seen Showgirls in a while?
Not in a while. I was probably still in high school, I think.
Whenever that came out. Elizabeth Berkley boobs.
I wanted to see, I didn't care whose boobs they were at that point.
There are a lot of boobs to pick from.
Yeah.
I loved it. I haven't seen it in forever. Great movie. I totally recommend it. If you haven't seen Showgirls, go in with the right mindset. Amazing. The last movie I want to talk about that I watched several that I could talk about, but this is the last one I'm going to highlight. It is called Against the Dark. And Against the Dark is a Steven Seagal trash movie about walking through hallways in an abandoned hallway. Walking through hallways in an abandoned hallway? Walking through hallways in an abandoned hospital that sits on the top of a rooftop. And he's one of these elite hunters that hunts these vampire / zombie things. And Steven Seagal probably has 5 minutes of screen time in this movie.
This is a newer movie, right?
No, it's like early 2000s. But Stevie's in it for a total of maybe 5 minutes, maybe. The other thing, I made a really great joke to my friends when we were watching it. So The Rock, his cousin is like his stunt double in a lot of his stuff. His cousin was an American Gladiator. And whenever he would come on, I would say, "Can you smell what The Rock's cousin is cooking?" And I thought that was the funniest thing that I had said in a long time when I was watching it, if that tells you anything. So yeah, that was a horrible movie, and it ends absolutely ridiculously. And when it ended, we were all just, my friends and I were watching it. We were just looking at each other like, what did we just watch? Like, there's no real story, no real plot, anything to it. It just has Steven Seagal. That's its thing.
It sounds like enough.
Man, sometimes it is enough.
Do you want to rattle off the other things you watched, or you want to just leave it as is for that and save that for another day?
Yeah, we'll save it for another day.
Sounds like you found a lot of things that are potential topics in the future.
Yeah. I was doing reconnaissance.
I'm certainly interested in that Dudikoff Mark Hamill thing.
Midnight Ride.
Sounds like a winner.
It's definitely a winner. It definitely wins some kind of award.
Well, my week of watching wasn't nearly as interesting as yours. I don't know if I talked about this last week, but I started it whatever week we watched Godzilla and finished it this week. I was a 3-part miniseries about John DeLorean that's on Netflix. And I don't really know. Well, I do know. I don't really have a lot of interest in John DeLorean to begin with, but when, it plays a little automatic trailer or whatever, it gives you, it's like, this guy made cars and then he became a cocaine drug lord. I was like, guh. I was promised cocaine and debauchery, and I got, out of the 3 episodes, cocaine doesn't even show up till like, other than like he used cocaine once, until like episode 3. I'm like, it wasn't really as much as it was hyped up to be. But his story's interesting, I guess. I just wanted more cocaine and drug lording. And if they're trying to sell him as a drug lord, are you familiar with his story, or not really?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen bits and pieces, like little documentaries here and there about him, and I thought he got caught up in cocaine, but I thought it was just like a recreational thing that got a little kind of deep for him, essentially.
No, it's actually stupider than that.
Okay.
I mean, it kind of started that way.
He was like recorded or something on videotape, right?
Yeah, so essentially the very, very Cliff Notes version, because this is like a 3-part miniseries, is his company's in financial trouble. He's having a hard time getting money because he was getting money from the British government, and he needed more at this moment. And he basically went to his neighbor's house and said, "Hey, I know a guy that can move a bunch of cocaine." And his neighbor goes, "Really?" And then immediately told the feds, and they set up a sting, and he was arrested shortly thereafter. I'm like, so if he's a drug lord, he's like the worst fucking drug lord that I've ever heard, because he's basically just walking around telling people that he's trying to move international amounts of cocaine or whatever. So it's pretty unimpressive by like drug documentary standards, but kind of funny. Like, this guy is clearly smart. Like, he became a CEO of, I think it was GM, at a pretty young age, started his own company, figured out how to swindle Britain out of all this like land and, money and shit. Maybe swindle's the wrong word, until he got arrested and the company went under. But he did a lot of things that it's like, you're not an idiot. You've got some things figured out. And then he goes and blabs to his neighbor like, "Hey, I want to sell a bunch of cocaine," and thinks like, yeah, this would be cool. Vet out who you're going to share how much cocaine you're selling to.
If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have Back to the Future.
I think we'd still have Back to the Future. I just don't think we would have the same car in it.
No. I refuse to believe that.
You got to isolate that no and just use that as a drop, because that was a pretty good no.
I can do it on command.
I also watched a documentary called Sneakerheads, which is just about collecting sneakers and the quote unquote culture around that. I'm like watching it and thinking 2 things. One, I think it's cute that you've identified a problem with yourself that is a chronic problem and put a cute little label on it and call it culture, so it's not a problem now. So I appreciate that. And two, I'm like, God, I have way too many of these tendencies for this culture that I'm watching about. But I mean, it was really just like a history of like, first there was a Chuck Taylor, then there was this, and it's just like it's basically just showcasing all these popular shoes over, the last probably 60 years or so. If you like sneakers, it's moderately entertaining for that. If you don't like sneakers, you'd be bored and move right on. But if you're me, see it and you're like, oh, I got a problem.
Do they go into more shoes or more of like the quote unquote culture of people that collect and sell and all that stuff? Or is it just kind of a wide
pretty good
swath?
balance of both, like probably 50-50 of each, which is kind of why I liked it. If it was just, I mean, I'll sadly watch a documentary that is just the history of like a sneaker or sneakers or whatever. Like I find enough of that interesting, but when you start putting the word culture on everything, and I guess it's true because there's enough people that do it, but I feel like the word culture for something like that is kind of getting overused so that it like I said, it kind of excuses your things that are questionable to begin with. Like I'm guilty of this myself. Like I've spent almost $200 on a pair of sneakers, and that's a really stupid thing to admit. And there's people that $200 is like the equivalent of, yeah, exactly. So that's why I'm saying like, yeah, you can call it culture, but like you're also kind of sugarcoating a stupid thing that you're doing at the same time. Like, again, to go back to the cocaine thing, selling cocaine could be considered culture if you get enough people around you doing it all with the same mindset. That doesn't make it a smart decision to do, right?
All me and my friends are all into cocaine. We call it a culture.
You got to promise not to tell the feds, man.
Hey, Bretta.
I think Seagal just showed back up for a minute. Although he is a cop, so he'd have a good cover if he was going to sell cocaine.
I wouldn't think of him as being a cop if I saw that guy.
Is he still a cop? I know he
Who the fuck
was.
knows? Who knows?
I did do a rewatch of Repo Man, which I know I watched that relatively recently, but it's on Netflix now, so I just kind of landed on it and started watching it again. My wife told me, this is the stupidest movie I've seen you watch in some time. And I said, you didn't see the movie I was watching earlier that we were actually talking about this week. Repo Man is a stupid movie, but it's a much better stupid movie. And if you have Netflix, which I'm assuming most people do, and you want a good 80s piece of like weird nostalgia, it's a good one to pop on.
I was trying to show the trailer for Repo Man to my wife and one of the kids, and my wife kept saying, as it's playing, as the trailer's playing, is this appropriate? Is this appropriate? Is this appropriate? I'm like, it's a trailer. It's not like that. It was the Criterion trailer, so maybe they said a little bit more than you would normally see.
Criterion release?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, it's a trailer for this movie. It's not that bad. I mean, yeah, when you watch the trailer, it's like, you could be one of two mindsets. This is something I never want to watch, or this looks like the coolest thing that I'm maybe going to see. I mean, if you're watching the trailer, you're probably on the fence if you're going to watch it or not. But
I don't know. I've always had a soft spot for that movie, and I had no problem watching it, and being told it was dumb kind of made me like it just a little bit more. Then the only other thing I really watched was some like 45-minute video of some guy in a ska band shirt drinking every kind of monster he could find from America and the UK. So he had like 50 cans of Monster all laid out, and he just started going through them and commenting on them. And of course, it progressively got worse as he went on because he wants to drink 50 cans of Monster straight.
This is all in one sitting?
I'm assuming. I mean, he's wearing the same shirt the whole time, and he looks like progressively more
dead.
Kind of, because it's funny, like his talking accelerates greatly as the video goes on, which is funny. But his body language, his eyes, and his like just demeanor just crash
Brain
and
function.
continue to crash. And then he starts kind of going through, because they do coffee ones and they do fruit ones and stuff. And he's like backing up a lemonade to a coffee and then chasing it with like a watermelon or some shit. And then where he really fucked himself over is right in the middle. He apparently Monster makes like a protein drink, like a protein milkshake type thing with caffeine, presumably. Yeah, I didn't know either, but apparently it's a thing.
Good. That does not sound, especially in the middle of drinking 50 different energy drinks. Monsters.
Here's what he did. He couldn't find that. So he took just regular, black and green can, the original, OG, and mixed it with a random protein powder that he had. And the best part is, I don't know how much experience you have with protein powders, but they don't usually do this. He puts it in the drink, and immediately the fizz or the carbonation just goes and shoots to the top of this glass. And he's just got this like giant, like he put maybe, if this is like a 6-inch tall glass, He put maybe like an inch of Monster in there and just like a scoop of protein powder. And this thing it was like Mentos and Coca-Cola. Like and he drank it and he looked miserable. Like I said, it's not informative in any way. Again, if you tell me this guy's going to drink 50-ish, or I didn't even count how many it was, like a shitload of Monsters in a row, that's a bad idea. Anyone can tell you that. And yeah, just watching him progressively get worse and worse as he goes through it. I'm like, I'm kind of enjoying your suffering, and I'm okay with that. So that was why I was watching before we got on today. So.
I thought you were going to say, if you told me that this guy started drinking these Monsters and he died, I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised by that either, but I would expect that to be off camera.
Well, it kept rolling. There's no editing.
It's just a corpse with a can of Monster in his hand.
A skeleton. That's
and
what
the
they
ska
find.
band shirt on.
Right. A skeleton with a Monster can, half drink.
It's the way I want to go.
We talked before we started. I had this little trip, Lost Art in Walker, Michigan, with the ice cream beers. It's kind of like
it's a brewery for those of you outside of Michigan.
And they make these beers. That's part of their ice cream beer series. And what it is, if you've had like a smooge or if you've had like a really thick New England style IPA, this is even thicker than that. Yeah, this is like thicker than any other beer or smooge or any of those. And smooge is pretty thick. And it's like one of those things where I could imagine you mixing Monster and protein powder. Gross, but it's so filling. You know, after having a little bit of it, that was the first place that we went when we were out there. And it was, you had to take a break for a couple hours. Even if you didn't have any kind of alcohol buzz or anything, you just couldn't drink anymore because you were so full from this thick ass drink. Yeah,
that's a big part of why I've been slowing down on my beer intake is I don't like feeling that kind of full. It's bullshit.
It is bullshit. I agree.
That's all I got for the week, though. Do you want to take a break and come back and talk about this movie that is, a movie that is comparable to Repo Man in some ways?
A movie that is, by definition, a movie? Let's take a break.
All right. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about The Occultist. Hey guys, I just want to take a second to tell you about fellow You Run Podcast network members, the Horror Friendly Podcast. This podcast explores the horror genre one film at a time with one novice panel member and 2 enthusiasts. Join the Horror Friendly Podcast this month as they welcome in guests and as they celebrate a special birthday episode. So head on over to yourunpodcast.com where you can find all the previous and new Horror Friendly Podcast episodes, as well as all the other great You Run Podcast Network members. All right.
That's a good way to start.
We're going to talk about the movie The Occultist. This movie came out in 1988. And, well, there's only been one other movie I couldn't find reviews on before this. And I managed to dig one up on Letterboxd. And I'm going to say our third-party review this week has not been fact checked, so I can't speak if what this person says is 100% true. And I don't necessarily know if I agree with this opinion, but Dave on Letterboxd, we're reading your review anyway.
Thanks, Dave.
Dave says, incredible and unrateable madness from the gay porn director turned B-movie director turned back to gay porn directing, Tim Kincaid. The Occultist, or as it's known in Australia, Waldo Warren. I know that's what it's called in Australia, but Waldo Warren could be my favorite Kincaid sci-fi action bonanza yet. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go into plot stuff. That's enough. Because he goes on and writes a book after.
What's the rating?
It's incredibly unrateable, is what he rated it.
Not even like a thing out of thing.
He didn't put any stars on it.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Incredibly unrateable.
What a surprise. All right, so we're going to head over to IMDb and we talk about the storyline and the plot. We're going to read one of them first, not quite sure. Sometimes we talk about if a movie has it, like what it is out of a number. This doesn't have a number out of a number, so I'm assuming this is the lowest number out of the lowest number, or highest number, I guess. Not rated very well, I guess.
It's in the bottom.
Storyline and plot again, and this is spoiler alert. Okay, so spoilers in this, and something that I don't even know if it's really actually said out loud. A cyborg private eye is hired to protect a Caribbean president visiting New York City from sadistic sorcerers, where behind the lush beauty of the island lurk powers of darkness so evil no man has ever fought them and lived. So then if we go down to the storyline, this is care of Frank Fob 2 at Yahoo? Frank Fob 2 at yahoo.com. Frank has to say, a cyborg private eye is hired to protect a Caribbean president visiting New York City. This so far sounds very familiar. Unknown to him, the president's daughter is in league with his country's rebels who are trying to assassinate him. This is categorically false. Just wanted to put that out there. This is a total red herring. That's not what this movie is. But you kind of touched on something I wanted to talk about just really quickly, because we talk about the cast sometimes when we talk about, especially when we're in the IMDb section of this. This movie is one of those movies that stars very many people who have pretty much been in nothing other than the movie that we talk about. So this is another one of those. The big standouts of this are Rick Giannossi, who plays Waldo Warren, which amazing name for a character that you're supposed to think is a tough guy. And everybody else is pretty much indistinguishable. I can confirm, not from public, like not from my own knowledge, but I can confirm that director Tim Kincaid is a gay porn director. He goes by the names Mac Gage, or I'm sorry, he goes by the names Joe Gage or Mac Larson. That's his porn director name. And I have only seen one other Tim Kincaid movie. It was Mutant Hunt, I believe. And I can attest that is a total piece of shit as well. This is familiar territory for Mr. Tim Kincaid, other than the gay porn stuff.
I didn't realize that porn directors also had stage names.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like Jim Wynorski, right? How Jim Wynorski
okay.
had all those
That's
names, but he didn't direct porn. But
yeah,
I mean, maybe you
That
want
we
to
know
try
of.
and keep your, very true. He could be under a pseudonym. Joe Blueberry or whatever Jim Wynorski's, one of his stage names were. But yeah, Joe Gage or Mac Larson. That's Tim Kincaid's gay porn directing name.
So speaking of this movie being another one of those, this is a movie that I don't remember exactly how I stumbled on it, but the artwork on the poster for this is what drew my eye. And earlier today, you sent me a picture of the artwork of this. You basically said, this is like the best poster ever. And I agreed, because that's what drew me to this. So this is another one of those movies that's like, I almost feel bad for suggesting it, but frankly, for these like less than 3-star out of 10 ratings on IMDb, this has been honestly of the like 4 or 5 of those we've done on the better end of those, because at least something happens in this. I'm not sure there's anything that ties what happens together at any point, but there are a couple things that are memorable as far as what you actually see in this movie. So you mentioned breaking down this plot. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to mention before we got too into it, this is a movie that's free to be watched, freely available, I guess. You can watch it on Roku with ads, Crackle, or Pluto TV with ads. Sorry.
Yeah, I would. Well, yeah, watch it. Yeah, do that.
Watch it and tell us what you think.
So you mentioned right off the hop, like, I'm not sure about this as far as what's in this plot or storyline. A cyborg private eye. I don't remember them ever saying the word cyborg in this movie. And I
No.
watched this fucking movie twice because,
You poor bastard.
well, I'm dumb.
You dumb bastard.
I watched it once and thought, surely this movie can't be that complicated that I've somehow missed whatever the plot of this entire story was. And then I watched it a second time. I'm like, no, I think there's just not much one there. But we're going to jump around because, and here's your spoiler warning for this movie that you're probably not going to watch because you probably don't hate yourself as much as we do. We don't hate you. We hate ourselves. Even when the cyborg detective or whatever uses his penis gun in the middle of the most awkward, like, piss scene
You're
ever.
giving away the best part of the movie, like right off the jump. The semi-automatic penis gun.
Yeah, but it's not like you get a good shot at it. Like, for all you, like, if you had told me, let's just take the word cyborg out and said, this guy just shoots at the hip all the time. The way that scene is shot, I mean, this whole movie shot like Kevin Smith movies. Like, the camera doesn't move at all. Like, people literally walk in and out of frame while fighting each other. They'll leave the frame and then come back and the fight is still going on because the camera didn't move to follow the quote, quote, action.
Well, that's also assuming, not to interrupt, but that's also assuming that the characters move. There are so many scenes where the characters are like shoulder to shoulder, kind of look like angled, and they're looking at each other, but the camera is looking at them. So there's no, and they don't move. Like, their arms don't move. People talk and they mess up their lines and they just start over. Oh, you're going to tell me that company has that billions of dollars? That's like a literal, that's straight out of the movie. Care was not put into a lot of the acting and direction of the movie. I think that's pretty fair.
So, Sean, you're usually better at this than I am. Do you think there's an actual story here that's worth trying to describe? Like anything, any way to ballpoint it or
Yeah. Ballpoint
point it?
Let's try and ballpoint this, shall we, folks?
Right.
So I think the overarching plot of the movie is that Eli Manning, his dad, owned a security company.
This is definitely discount Eli Manning. He's somehow more shitty than Eli Manning.
Barney Sanford that's the character's name. Joe Derrick is the actor. Looks like a young Eli Manning. So Barney Sanford's dad owned a security company. They are going out of business because they have shitty products. Like one of the things that he pitches to a company is, oh, you want the budget option of what we have for security? It's a barking doorbell. When you ring the doorbell, it plays a recording of a dog barking loudly, and that's supposed to keep criminals and burglars out of away from your house. So they're looking for a way to make money because they're on the verge of bankruptcy. They have a guy who can be a bodyguard named Waldo Warren, aka the gunman. They only call him the gunman at the beginning when they say, oh, the gunman, his name is Waldo Warren. Waldo Warren is this guy that will work when he wants to. I think that's the exact quote. I wrote down the quote. What do they say? They say, the gunman only works when he wants. But they happen to have him under contract. He's a very mysterious character. And the island nation of Grand Caribe, yes.
By mysterious, do you mean poorly written?
Yes. Everything is
okay.
Everything is shrouded
Just
in
making
mystery
sure
in this
we're on
movie.
the same page with this.
Yeah.
With this.
What is it called? Caribe Island or something? Caribe is the country. But anyways, the president of this Caribbean nation is visiting the United States, and he's going to be talking or something. So they need a bodyguard for him. And Waldo Warren steps up and he says, yeah, I'll help you guys out. I'll be the bodyguard. You know, I have this contract with your dad and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, my dad's been in business for 40 years. You don't look much older than me. And he says, you know, he basically, it's shrouded in mystery because it's, again, poorly written. And what happens is the president...
Mystery being not written.
Right. Yeah. That's the way to make it the most mysterious, is for it to never have existed. Just like, I don't know, UFOs or something. I don't know. Let's not get into that. So anyways, he says that he's going to defend this. He's going to be a bodyguard for this foreign dignitary. The foreign dignitary gets killed, and the island that they're from is like all about voodoo and shit. So there's the occultist name essentially is about the voodoo rituals and shit. And let me mention, when they show there's 3 sets in this movie. There's a warehouse, there's a house, like a foyer, grand ballroom kind of foyer, and another warehouse that's got a bunch of island shit thrown all over it to make it look like it's some place where voodoo people hang out. The voodoo people?
I called it the voodoo sewer drain.
Yeah. The voodoo lounge, the voodoo sewer drain. These people look like the Chappelle Show had an open casting call for Ashy Larry, like relatives. And they just come out and they like shake around like they're kind of cracked up, you know? And they're like, I like the beginning. There's the movie starts with this voodoo ritual and there's one white guy in the whole crowd.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, where did this white guy come from? He's just like bouncing around, you know, in his little shitty cut off sweatpants, and they he's in
like cut off sweatpants and like a button down shirt, and he turns into...
He doesn't have a shirt on because he has a tattoo, or he has a scorpion tattoo on his chest.
I thought when this really doesn't matter for this movie at all, but I thought when he starts
about this insignificant
I thought when he starts he has like a button down shirt, like unbuttoned, so you can see his chest and the tattoo you're mentioning, and he's like hopping around, and then they like strip him and fillet him and, you know, whatever. But again, this doesn't... White guy get dead is what happens.
But yeah, that's basically what it's about. I mean, I think I just told you the entire thing. And at the end, I mean, I can tell you the ending right now because it doesn't matter.
It's pretty much the same thing as the beginning.
Yeah, the voodoo priestess, you find out that the daughter of the president who gets assassinated is like part of the bloodline of this voodoo cult leader, and stuff happens. The general of the island is like trying to do a coup, essentially.
All right.
There you go.
I'm still not sure why there's 2 random Eli Manning and like discount pops. What's his name? The fucking fat guy detective. God, this casting's just so bad.
The dude that was like the father's confidant or whatever, the guy that's helping Barney, Eli Manning, run the business.
Yeah, the guy who gets choked out by a woman. So this movie is full of there's like 3 bad but comically bad fight scenes where the fight is just... I don't even want to say that it's choreographed. It's almost like if you threw two kids in a field and said, go fight, but like don't really hit each other. This is kind of what you would get, but the kids might be more creative. This old guy's fight when this chick shows up and just starts choking him or whatever. This is why I was referring to, like, they're in this small room that has like a desk in it or something like that. And basically, again, the camera never moves in this entire fight scene. Eli Manning and Grandpa
Munster.
Manning or whatever, Grandpa Munster, are sitting there looking at some bullshit on the desk. This woman walks in and just starts choking him out. Eli Manning sits there and stares at him for like a solid 20 seconds of screen time. Doesn't intervene, doesn't say, hey, stop it. I believe he has a gun, doesn't like pull his gun and say, get the fuck out of here.
No, I don't think he does. But yeah, he doesn't do shit.
I thought
he just stands there.
Yeah, he stands there. So those two, eventually Grandpa Munster gets up and starts choking her back. So they're essentially both choking each other. They walk towards the camera and off screen. Another random person shows up and starts beating the shit out of Eli Manning. Eventually, that fight walks off screen, and the original fight that's happening where the two are strangling each other, strangle themselves back into screen, and then the fight's just over, if I remember right.
The way the fight ends is it's the best. It is the best. I need to put a clip somewhere, something. They're fighting, they come back, and the guy that came in that's going to fight Grandpa Munster, because Grandpa Munster somehow took care of the woman. The guy is going to stab Grandpa Munster, and Eli Manning picks up a chair and he taps him with it, and it turns into toothpicks, and he screams chair 5 seconds after he hits him with it. Chair.
Yeah.
And I think the old guy, Grandpa Munster, pulls out a gun and fires it or something, and they both, Eli Manning, the guy, the actor, he acts like it's a real gun, and he is totally like, he doesn't know that this is supposed to happen. He looks like he shit his pants.
Kind of be funny if it was a real gun, just so Eli Manning does shit.
It'd be great if it wasn't real, but he didn't tell him that he had it. Like, nobody told him that this was going to happen.
So like the Alien scene, but on a much lower budget.
Yes.
There's also a skull mace thing that is in this movie that gets produced at some point. I have no idea where the fuck this thing comes from. Like when this character, it almost looks like he pulls it out of a briefcase, but it's
like in a wall or something.
He
just produces it somewhere out of midair. It's weird.
Yeah. And it's not small. It's like he got it from Halloween USA or something. And, starts doing ninja shit with it. But what's better than that is I'm assuming it's supposed to be the same skull with spiky things on it that they show later that fucks up the dude's face. We're basically going to give you all the reasons to watch this movie in this, because this is all we can talk about with it. There's not enough story to talk about it otherwise.
Sure.
But sure. So you're shaking your head no. Does that mean the skull I'm thinking of with the broken bottles in it is a different spot?
Yeah, so the mace skull is, if you look at any other cover art for this movie other than what's on Just Watch, or the guy in flames basically with the two babes.
What will be on the cover for this episode?
For this episode. If you're looking at any other one, it's a woman in like a short red dress and she's holding this chain with the skull. That's what that is. It's like shows up for 3 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, the cover for this, the second cover, the one with the girl in the dress, looks like something off a Dick Tracy comic.
And the guy that gets hit, that looks like the other alternate cover, the third cover, he steps on this. So we didn't talk about it because it really is very insignificant, but there's another security company.
Everything.
Everything about this movie is insignificant. There's a second security company run by a guy called Cyprian Lane. And they show up in this movie. The guy has a suit on, and he's followed around by these like preppy nerd guys that have button downs and like dockers. They follow him around, and they're trying to, I don't really know they're just trying to throw a wrench in the plans. And one of the preppy guys is walking, and there's a tripwire that he doesn't see, and he just barely nudges it. And they don't show what happens. It's just like this, it's like a skull with like beer bottles stuffed in its eyes, and the ends broken off, so they're jagged beer bottles. And he hits the tripwire. Yes. It's best set design ever. He sets the tripwire.
It is a pretty cool prop. I won't lie. If I could get that prop, that would be
You should get one for your house.
I'm not a prop collecting guy. Like I don't want to get into that. I got enough hobbies that cost too much money, like sneakers. But if someone wants to find me the original skull with broken beer bottles in it that was used in the film The Occultist, I might have to put some money down.
You wouldn't turn them down. So, most times when you think of a tripwire or some kind of trap, like a booby trap, you think it's like fast acting. This thing he touches the wire and it just slowly like falls into him. And I think the broken beer bottles must get stuck in his face, because that's a later effect that happens like 15-30 seconds later where the guy's like, oh, he's screaming and there's like big jagged shards of glass sticking out of his face. So he didn't get hit with the mace, but these other two guys did, and it's just
as good.
It's the thing that, like, when I thought this when I was watching it, people don't necessarily, especially in this time frame, like in the 80s, you probably didn't know that you were making something like this. You probably didn't think you were making a masterpiece or anything, but you probably didn't set out to make something that was like this bad. And if you could ask the person now, like, what did you think when you were doing this role or this action, when you were acting in this movie? And I think at the time they probably thought it was serious, but it looks so ridiculous. Like, you could look at it with like 2024 eyes, or even later, like as a non-film maker person, and watch something like this and be like, why? Like, why did you make this? What was the thought process behind this? And that's just what I was thinking watching this guy swing this big, like, chrome spray painted plastic skull around on a chain.
Well, that's a fun thing, and the weird thing about movies like this and like lesser known movies is there's some of them, and I can't think of one off the top of my head because there's so many of them, but there's some of them that you can see a small movie that like didn't have a lot going for it, and you're like, okay, but there's a good idea there, and I can see why you tried to make this. Like I said, I've suffered through this movie twice, and I still don't really know what the fuck this movie's about. I know enough to talk about it for, a little bit on this, but that's about as far as I'm going to go. Were there any scenes in this that were memorable enough to call them positive in this for you?
This will be edited out because it's a long pause. So
while you ponder out, I found a lot of humor in the closing scene. What would we call him? Grandpa Munster or whatever, and Eli Manning are talking, and some random person comes up and says, Eli Manning, your fiance has left you. You're not getting married anymore. I was like, what? There was a fiance? There was a wedding? Like, I clearly missed that, but that's not the best part. The best part is Eli Manning looks at her, kind of does an Eli Manning, like the actual Eli Manning type shrug, and goes, well, I suppose that's okay. I'm not sure I wanted to get married anyway. And he literally just shuffles off, bobbing his head back and forth, and Sean can see it, but no one else can. I'm wiggling my head, and just wanders off.
Like a bobblehead.
Yeah, just walks off screen like, that's fine. I didn't want to get married anyway. Like, that is the most comically bitch response I've ever seen to a guy getting dumped in a film.
Well, the thing that makes that even greater is that he tells Waldo that he wants to be a gunman too. And the guy can't even fight. He let the old man get beat up while he's just stood there and eventually hit somebody with a chair. Like, you're not cut out for this line of work. But I can tell you that at the beginning of the movie, that Eli Manning's running through the streets or whatever, he's training for a marathon. And the secretary lady who tells him that his fiance dumped him, at the beginning, she was saying to Grandpa Munster that she liked him, but he was getting married. So I could see some kind of maybe down the line setting up something. Maybe after this movie, they have some rendezvous.
For the Occultist too. Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. Electric Skullaloo.
Is there anything in this you want to point out that's negative and worth pointing out? I don't know that this is the kind of movie that you really need to highlight flaws because the entire movie is a flaw, but is there anything that is worth mentioning?
I thought there were a few good scenes. There's a scene where the General Esteve, who I thought they were going for Estevez, but it was just like Steve basically is his name. He's the one that tries to launch the coup against the president to steal power or whatever. And near the end of the movie, there's a scene he's like looking for the daughter of the president. And he's yelling like, this money could have been ours in this briefcase. I've got $17 million. And it's just like a little brown leather attaché case. And I thought to myself, how the hell, unless it's just a check that says $17 million written on it, how is he holding $17 million in this briefcase? The other thing, with all this voodoo stuff, they have a scene where there's like fire walking, they walk on hot coals or whatever. But the way that they do the effect is basically they're just charcoal briquettes that are spread out and there's a red light underneath them. I think you would burn the fucking shit out of your feet if you were walking on charcoal briquettes, because that's like, when they do it, it's like wood and it's all shredded and tinder and ash and stuff. So there's insulation. That would not be a good idea to do it that way. The practical effects, which there are a few, are atrocious, but there is one at the very beginning when, for whatever reason, they garrote that woman at the original voodoo ceremony. And I thought that looked pretty good. Like I wrote in my notes, the garrote effect looks pretty good. And I was hoping that it would continue on. I didn't realize when I first started watching this that it was a Tim Kincaid movie. So I thought that there would be some level of quality possibly throughout it. And I was sadly mistaken. But I thought that garrote scene was like, hey, that's not too bad for something of this quality. So that was pretty decent.
I don't really have much else. I mean, this movie's
it's very meh.
cut and dry. So what time is it?
Well, I think you would know that this is, I'm going to cut all this out. I'm just going to play this.
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
I'm the one who decided that we were going to suffer through this. I said to Sean just last week, I said, you know what? We've been watching all these good movies that people have actually seen, movies that people give a shit about. Fuck all that. We're going to watch The Occultist. And he said, that's a good idea.
Let's lose half our audience.
Yeah. Or, perhaps people will be like, what is this month? Anyway, this movie is not good. Like I said, I've watched this thing more than once and I still really don't know exactly what happened in it. I know there's a lot of stuff that is quote unquote voodoo. It's very stereotypical. And I got a feeling if you're in the whole PC police squad, like there's probably stuff in there that will piss you off. So don't go into it thinking that it's going to be quality in pretty much any way. That said, there's a couple redeeming factors. Like I said, the acting is so bad and the camera work is so bad that you can find humor in that if you like these kinds of movies. There's a penis machine gun. Unfortunately, you don't get to see a good look at it because there's not enough dong in movies, even when it's machine gun dong. But there is a penis machine gun. And quite possibly the most awkward urination scene that I've ever seen put to film. But at the end of the day, like, it's just not a great movie. It's not memorable. And now that we've talked about it, I really can't imagine myself watching this anytime soon or again, hopefully. I'm going to give this really just like a flimsy, filleted 3 hot dogs with beer bottles shoved in them and shoved into some guy's face out of 10.
I like that you had to remember out of 10.
Yeah, well, just 3 hot dogs.
Okay.
No, out of infinite.
Out of an infinite amount of hot dogs. All right, well, for me, wow, this is bad. It's just really plain awful. I'd say at some point it crosses over from just regular horrible garbage to slightly humorous horrible garbage, but it's still, at the end of the day, horrible garbage. There are movies that are fun to watch when you're drunk or maybe when you're high or whatever, and then there's this. The acting
and now you get to the crux of why I had to watch this a second time.
The acting's bad, the action is bad, the effects and the story are bad. There's not much redeeming other than the occasional, well, that's fucking stupid. And I think it would be worth watching if you could get like a 10-minute supercut of all the things that won't make you angry when you're watching this. But because it would only be a 10-minute, the 10-minute might be generous. It's few and far between. There's not a whole lot going on. I got to give it 3 dick SMGs out of 11 hot dogs. And to sum it up,
here's a nice piece of shit.
Here's a nice piece of shit.
Yeah. So now that we've given our opinion of this.
Excuse me. This movie here, it's got a devil. It's got devils. It's about devils. You ever heard about a devil?
What devils? Did you watch the movie? There's no devils. There's a fucking penis gun and a skull with a beer bottle in it.
This movie is called The Occultist. It's about a devil. I mean, if you think about it, devils are about the occult and stuff like that. So I got to tell you, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. So I'm going to say, I don't know, 97 skull things with beer bottles in them at about 100. 97 out of 100.
I got to say, you have questionable taste in everything. And I pity you and your decisions in life.
Hey, they only show the finest cinema down here in hell. So gotta watch what you can get.
I guess that's one way to look at it. Anyway, now that we've gone to hell, are you going to want Sean back or are you going to just... Oh, you're back.
What do you mean back? I never left. Been sitting here listening to this devil guy talk.
Oh, I don't know. I'm bad at this. Speaking of bad at this, we got through this movie eventually. We've had Satan himself come in
97 out of 100.
And now, with that strong of a rating, we're going to go into question of the week. And we're going to take a little U-turn here. We didn't mention this at the beginning of the show, but if you're unaware, Roger Corman passed away on Thursday of last week, so just under a week ago at this point. We're fans of Roger Corman here, so in light of his death, we're going to celebrate him a little bit by asking the question, what is your favorite Roger Corman flick? It does not have to be a movie he directed. A lot of people seem to want to ask or kind of qualify that. I don't care, just something he was involved with that you want to say, and that's what we're going to read off. No one's answering at this point anyway, so I don't know why I'm giving a qualifier, but we're going to start over on Instagram, and we're going to kick right off with our good friend Sam over at Feature Features DTF, and he's going to say, I got a special spot in my heart for Carnosaur. which he was a producer of. Sean OC32 says
Which is
all
not
the
me.
Vincent Price Poe movies. Is not you. So we didn't have any answers on Facebook, so we're going to switch over to X, where a few other people answered. Some of them had right answers, some of them did not. They're all right. Jay Caruso's who is at Robo Pulp says, I really like X, the man with the X-ray eyes. In Film We Trust, which is IFWT Pod, says, I've always been a freak for 60s counterculture, and one of the subgenres that grew out of that period was the outlaw biker film. Many put their stamp on it, but I don't think anyone topped the anti-authoritarian The Wild Angels by Corman, which is from Liam at In Film We Trust. At Sinful Redhead says, The Mask of the Red Death is my favorite Poe story and my favorite adaptation of a Poe story, and you can't go wrong with Vincent Price. He's a handsome man. He's dead, but sure, we'll give it to him when he was alive. He pretty no more. Friends over at Dissect That Film said, if it's one that he directed, then it's either Bucket of Blood or Mask of the Red Death. Producer, he says Piranha in 1979, and actor, he said Silence of the Lambs. I always forgot that he acted until I read that. Yes, he did. A Man After Sean's Heart, who's at Dr. Snakes, says, man, that's like asking me what my favorite food is. You didn't answer past that.
None of them.
Yeah. Well, at Pataphysician says, I might have a different answer tomorrow, but right now I'll go with Mask of the Red Death and Death Race 2000. At TFOBC on TW says, Attack of the Crab Monsters, 1957. At John Weagley says, The Intruder. That's a different Intruder than the movie that we spoke about and did a movie night of, and equally great. At Lisa P, who is Lisa at the Port, says, Little Shop of Horrors, I really can't pick a favorite, but this always comes to mind when I hear his name. And Michael Crower, who is at Maddox31_1, says, Targets, if it has to be one he directed, The Haunted Palace. Sean, as the resident Corman aficionado, what
really?
is your favorite?
Yikes. I'm more of familiar with like his 80s stuff that he helped produce. I mean, there's so much to say because he launched so many careers and he launched so many people that, you know, eventually moved on to being in bigger and better things. You know, if we just talk about some of the 80s things that I really enjoy that he produced, didn't necessarily direct or anything, but, you know, we could look at things like Chopping Mall. We could look at things like Deathstalker. And I think Deathstalker 2 is probably one of my favorite things he produced, but my absolute favorite thing that he was involved in, and it's kind of a, I don't know, asterisk because he wasn't really involved much in this, is the 70s. I don't know what year it is. I think it's like 79 or something. Shogun Assassin, which is basically a compilation movie of two other movies called Lone Wolf and Cub, the Lone Wolf and Cub movies from Japan. They kind of like did a supercut and they merged the two movies together. I think there's actually 6 movies in the whole series, and it was my kind of first real foray into bloody, super over the top samurai films, and it's a movie that I think that at least Shogun Assassin we should watch, because I think it's something that I've been pitching it in Crummy Movie March. And maybe we can do it in Ninja November, even though it's not a ninja movie. But I would say Shogun Assassin is my favorite thing he's been involved in. And if we went like a lot of his 80s catalog is stuff that, you know, it's all fun for me. It's all the kind of shit that I like.
So mine is a different kind of nostalgia, I'm going to say, and I'm kind of mad at Sam for stealing it, but I would say with Carnosaur as well. And the reason why is I remember because that came out the same year that Jurassic Park came out, and obviously, Jurassic Park was a huge movie. It's great. I love it. It's a favorite, blah, blah, blah. But I remember at the time when it came out, the world went into like dinosaur frenzy. Like it didn't matter what it was. You had to watch the stupid show with the baby with the frying pan, and dinosaurs were fucking everywhere in 1993. And then this little movie called Carnosaur came out. I started hearing buzz about it. Like, oh my God, this movie's like an R-rated Jurassic Park, which is technically true. But like, if you can pair it to Jurassic Park, just the sheer like visual difference between the two movies made me absolutely fall in love with Carnosaur, because it's kind of goofy and it's kind of great because of it. So I have a real soft spot for that one. So Sam, you stole my answer, but I'm going with Carnosaur anyway. So going forward, if you want to hear us talk about Shogun Assassin or anything else, you can always hit us up on social media. That's where you can find us and tell us things. You can tell us what you want us to watch, and we might or might not take that advice. Remains to be seen. But you can do that at Dewey Pod Monster. We're at Dewey Pod Monster on every social media network that we can think of. Just search for us. You can find us, and that's available. You can also find all of our previous episodes at crap.town or at yourunpodcast.com. We'd also really appreciate if while you're there, if you either like and review or share the episode. Those would be things that'd be really great that you could do to help us keep growing the show and finding new audiences to talk about movies like The Occultist. Sean, what am I forgetting about?
Well, if you want to hear us talk about Shawshank Redemption, you can drop us a line on our social media at DeweyPodMonster or crap.town, our website, and fill in the form. Give us all the deets. Tell us what you want us to do. If you want to follow us and answer the question of the week, again, social media at DeweyPodMonster. If you want to follow my craft beer adventures, you can follow me at youtube.drafttherapy.com, or you can find me on all the social media networks at Draft Therapy.
So that's it. We're going to go do some voodoo and get skinned alive and make hot dog beer skulls. Talk to you next week. Cheers.
Here's a nice piece of shit.
One subject that okay, I'm gonna start that over because apparently I can't fucking read. This is your favorite part of this, is supposed to be fuck
It
up
is.
reading things, isn't it?
Yeah. When I did with Boomer and Gabby, I mentioned I love the segment of the show where you get to read the responses.
Thankfully, you cut out most of the shit where I really sound like an asshole. How the fuck do you say this?